for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write our story.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to Words from the Wise. I'm still Gary Wise, the host of this Words from the Wise podcast, coming to you live and direct from Ocala, Florida, here in my little headquarters, aka my family room. And we are talking tonight with a special guest. This gentleman had his team, or he reached out to me, and they basically had seen the podcast. And they were interested in coming on the podcast and telling his story. And when I first got the email, I looked at it and I saw that this gentleman, his name he goes by the name of Mr. Chris Avery. Mr. Chris is from Utah. And for those of you that know me personally, you know that I was born and raised in Utah. And so that for me was a very special connection. And then as I read more into the email, I got the chance to read this awesome brother's story. You know, he's a faith first performance coach. I love that, leveraging faith to get out there and help people change their lives, guiding men, guiding families through men. They're everything about that speaks to me, and helping them figure out, you know, their God-given mission. He's the architect of this Run with Christ blueprint, that's, in my opinion, is a phenomenal idea. I hadn't heard a lot about that yet, so I'm hoping to hear some more about that. But it's a blend of coaching with a group, then of course authenticity, and then working his way into helping people out with resiliency and, you know, faith. Which I will tell you, this is what I tell my students all the time. Unfortunately, if you struggle with faith, you're probably going to struggle with everything else in the stress space. And so faith needs to be a starting point. He's somebody who's logged over 10,000 hours and not just, I would say, digesting audiobooks in general, but rewiring his mind so that he could then move into the coaching space, starting a business, impacting thousands, running marathons, did a 50-miler during COVID, something about 60,000 push-ups and pull-ups. We got to talk about that. And so, you know, without further ado, let me bring this monster to the stage. Mr. Chris Avery, how you doing, man?
Excellent, man. Thanks for having me on. I'm gonna bring you everywhere I go. You make me sound better than I am. You know, I like this.
My guy, man, I was reading through your stuff and I was like, wow, this guy has, I've done a lot of things. You are out there pushing some serious weight, bro. And that's so respect, man. Like, what's this thing about 60,000 push-ups and pull-ups in 90 days? Was that a goal you set out to achieve?
Yeah. So, you know, we did some challenges. We ran that marathon with like our first marathon we ran with no training. Then we came back and did the 50-miler, you know, and I love doing challenges. I love pushing myself to see to the breaking point. And so we just said, like, hey, let's see if we can hit 60,000 push-ups and pull-ups, you know, over 90 days. And we just got after it, man. And it wasn't necessary. Like it wasn't even that we had to do it every day. So it's not like the run thing that we set up now, but we don't have to do it every day. But, you know, at some point, if you don't do it, those really start to, you know, 300, 400 push-ups and pull-ups every day start to really pile up on you quickly if you get too far behind. So we really just kicked it out, man. Just had fun, prepped, and learned how to grow our body and grow that strength, and then just went after it and had a good time.
So before you attacked that goal in particular, for me, the push-ups and pull-ups goal, had you already been consistently doing push-ups and pull-ups like in the space of like large numbers?
No, not really. I mean, like, so, you know, I mean, I've been to the gym plenty of times up until when I started to run, but so we've been to the gym plenty of times. We already had some strength build up. I'm not going to say we didn't. And then we did spend a couple months prepping where we would just figure out how to get that many in a day with business and with kids and with what, you know, like how do I even do that? And so we practiced that a little bit more, and then we would get up to about 100 pull-ups in a day, and then we kicked in to actually the challenge.
Like it. I mean, I just think that what that shows is that elephant, you take it one bite at a time, right? Like, if you want to take on this big opportunistic idea or visionary goal, well, step one is get to eating, bro. Like start, right? chop, and then figure it out on the way there, because a lot of people are always trying to figure out every minute detail, and then unfortunately they get stuck in that decision making space. They don't ever get going.
Absolutely.
And so I think that is a very good example of somebody who just said, this is what we're gonna do. You figured out the broad strokes and said, all right, let's get to pushing and pulling, baby.
Yeah.
And away
Yeah.
you go.
And I think that speaks so true, Gary. And if we get to it more later, if we talk about the run, we can. But with that being said, whenever I coach men, so many of them are like, I want to know my purpose. And I sit there and go like, okay, cool. Have you ever driven a car that has no power steering? Have you ever done that?
I have, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
it's really hard, right? Like and then when you push on the gas, though, it gets going and you get a little bit of movement. And so
Right.
most of us want alignment without obedience. And for me, so what I'll do is I'll take the men back if they're having a problem finding their purpose. We take a step back and we go like, what are we going to just choose one thing? We're going to get in action. Whatever you feel is in alignment with your purpose, let's just get in action. Because as soon as that action happens, it really just clears the air and it gets you feedback quick. And once you get feedback, then you can maneuver and shift. And that what you said during the keen observation that you made about the push-ups and pull-ups is also applied later to the run stuff that we are doing right now at this moment.
Okay, and we're definitely going to talk to that, man. You know what's funny about running in particular running, and I'm a 5'6" man, so I didn't know I was short till I met my wife, and then now she lets me know consistently, right? Before I met her, brother, I thought I was 7 feet tall, man, and I'm like Gimli off Lord of the Rings, right? I'm built for long distances. I'm not built for speed.
Yeah, I love that.
Once upon a time, I was in San Diego with some brothers of mine, and we started trail running. And we decided that we were going to do a half marathon. And then my buddy calls me up and says, hey, man, I just signed up for the rock and roll whole marathon. And I was just like, that wasn't the plan. That's not what we said we were going to do. And but long story short, I ran a marathon. And so, and it changed my life in multiple ways, right? Because seeing just the diversity of people that was out there running the marathon was a life changer for me. Because in my mind, it was always some slim dude from like North Africa who was going to get out there and smoke it, right? The kids from high school that were on track team, right? And it was everybody. You had people in wheelchairs doing it. You had people singing freaking songs as they're running, doing it. It was an amazing culture or an amazing community, right? To be in that moment. And so I can definitely relate to you getting out there and running and leading people through running and showing them that they could probably go a lot farther than they thought they could go. And again, it goes back to that whole starting something, right? You just got it going, build the momentum and have a target, right? And I love what you said about having alignment with your purpose. Before I get into that one, because I want to talk that one some more too. You mentioned earlier briefly family, children, all that stuff. So can you take us back to the early days of you starting down this path? And were you married, having some kids, and like working a day job, and then all of a sudden thought, hey man, this is not what I want to do with my life?
Yeah. So man, that's a big question. Really the way it worked was I had a lot of mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues when I was younger. And so that set me up in my 20s to have a lot of issues, like obviously just mentally. And so I had to figure out how to handle myself emotionally. And luckily I met a young lady. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. I live in Utah now, but we met, I was in my early 30s. I found God finally. I was really, sober, taking good care of myself, and I met her. And she's really the reason I started running. Like I hated running, literally. And I'll say even today, I still hate running, right? Like 5 times, I did it 5 times in 20 years just to make sure I hated it. Cause I need to do it 5 times just to double check. Yep. Still hate it. Okay.
Right.
So, 5 times in 20 years. And then I met my now wife at that time. She was running marathons and she just kept saying like, hey, I'm going to run this marathon. You want to run me? I'm like, no, never. Don't ever ask me that. I was like, how far do you have to? I didn't even know how far you have to run. 26.2 miles, and you pay somebody for that. And she's like, yeah, it's gonna be fun. I'm like, no, it's not. But backing up what you're saying though, when I got there were everybody at the starting line was not the runner body that I thought I was gonna see. It is. It's a great community. It's just like the Spartan races. They're a great community, and it's very, diverse. But anyway, she runs her first marathon. We get married. I support her. I'm on the sidelines. I'm throwing fruit at her. we're getting her past the finish line and she finishes. She's pumped. So long story short, she's going to run her last marathon. She had friends that were going to run it with her, but they called her like about a month ahead of time and said, "Hey, we're not going to run. We have not trained enough. We're going to postpone it." And she was like, "Well, this is my last one, so I may drop out." And I said, "No, I'm not going to let you drop out." I was finally a good teammate, you know. I said, "No,
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you drop out. I got you. Right? I'm going to step into this." She's like, "You will?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's shocked. Like, "You really? Are you joking?" I'm like, "No, I'm signing up tonight. I'm going to get new shoes. I'm going to walk in them." And she's like, "What?" Yeah, I was like, "The only stipulation I want with you is I'm not going to train at all with you. You got a month. You're going to train. I'm not going to train." So we went and ran that. And that was really, like, and I want to answer your question. I want to make sure I'm answering it. So, at that time I was working with a company and doing a lot of coaching. So it wasn't like they told me what time to show up. It wasn't a 9 to 5 or anything like that. What they did was they supplied clients to us and we coached them. And so that was really what I was doing at that time, because throughout my sobriety / drug use, I worked for a lot of big companies and I never lost my job. I always kept it. So I always had a good paying, steady 9 to 5 job. And then when I finally got sober, I said, screw it. Like, this is, I don't feel fulfilled with the job. I don't love working for these people. What am I doing? I'm just selling my soul for a little bit of change. And so I decided I just wanted to go off and do my own thing. And I wanted to, when I got, part of me getting sober was being around these other people that were doing coaching. So I got to go to their events. I got to help them run their events. And that was my first transformation of getting sober. And so when I did that, I got to see the impact that because we were supporting the group of people, the new people coming in, you got to see the impact and the transformation. I went like, man, this is what I want to do. And so I moved to Utah. We start the runs, and that's really where it started, right? I wasn't working a 9 to 5 when I did the 60,000. I wasn't working a 9 to 5 when I did the this challenge that we're doing now, the run around the perimeter of America. I wasn't doing it for any of those. So it was very much just me, my wife, and then we had a little girl during the training for this new run, but we didn't even have kids up until that point.
Okay, amazing. And so what I love about that part of your story is your wife needing, she had the support group and then she did it, and that caused her to be a little shaky, and you stepped in, right? And for me, that hits home because I just hate when we have a goal that we say we're going to do as a team, whether it's my family or my school, at my classroom, or when I was in the service, and then all of a sudden people don't want to do it because they don't feel like we prepared enough, right?
Yep.
And for me, that's a conversation we can have, but it doesn't mean we don't get to not do the thing, right?
Right.
Right. Like, the mission's got to go on, right? So whatever we got to do to prepare in this red zone, right? Let's get that done, but we're not going to just push it off, because that's bigger. That's a bigger problem than just not doing it, in my opinion. There's a lot of other problems that cascade into that. And then for you stepping up and helping her, I'm a big believer in telling people that my wife is my coach, right? Without a doubt. And I didn't make that up, bro. I got it from Cat Williams, right? On a comedy special.
I love that, bro.
Cat Williams is like, your woman better be your coach. She better be telling you what to do and how to do it. And I remember watching that comedy routine, like, damn, he's spitting bars, man. Like, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
She knows me better than I know myself.
She does.
And in that moment, she needed you to be that person for her. And luckily she accepted you to do that, right? Because you had your boundaries, right? You said, hey, but I got to do it this way.
Right. Yeah.
Right? But she accepted those boundaries, and then away you guys went. So that's an amazing story. And of course, it began the journey that you're on now. I also can connect with the fact of, just like you had my challenges with drugs and alcohol. I'm currently just over a year sober.
Congrats, man.
And thank you. I still don't know why I'm sober. I'll be honest with you. Like, I'm an alcoholic. I knew I was an alcoholic, but I've been very regimented for a while, right? But it got to the point where my wife was just like, I think I was getting older, right? And body chemistry. And she was always worried about having to take care. Like, she's always worried, is this going to be the night that he throws it all away? And I get that. And when you're not drinking, I don't have to have that worry, right? I'm not gonna throw it away because of alcohol, right? Like, that's not a worry, right? Like, it could be a throw it away because of some other reason, but it's not gonna be booze, right? And that was It's been an interesting journey. And so I think a lot of people out there that struggle with their self-medicated ways that they handle things in life, because it's not just always booze and drugs, right? We've got different ways that we unfortunately cover up things that we're struggling with. But I think a lot of people can connect with that. Now, back to I want to get to your faith real quick, if you don't mind.
No, I love
I,
it.
I love hearing people's faith stories, because I think that it reminds a lot of us how we built our own, as well as somebody might hear your story and really resonate with that. So, what was it that caused you to wake up one day, or what was that experience where you felt God and you felt like, okay, this is real. Like, I'm gonna do something about this feeling.
Yeah, that's a great question. It really started with almost one of the last days of me using. I just remember, like I met, like I knew there was a God, right? My parents
Mm-hmm.
said, "Hey, there's a God." We went to church on those Christmas Eve, sing along kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that was all I really knew. And so
Right.
going back to just when I got sober, I got around these amazing people,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them were followers of Christ, and a lot of them were just really good people, good family people, and they're the ones that helped me understand my mental struggles. And I remember like going to different churches and just looking and going like, man, all right, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them just said like, hey, I think you're searching a lot for God, and it seems like you are. Like, do you want to have like discussions about him? And I said, yeah, like I'm ignorant. I don't know. I know his name, God. That's what I got for you. That's what I had to add to this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So as long as you're willing to be one-sided conversation where you share a lot with me, I'm open to it. And so we started just talking, and it really helped fortify from what I had gone through in my past
Mm-hmm.
to seeing the forgiveness that you
Mm.
get, and to see the lifting of not only just the forgiveness for you, but like forgiveness now that you can apply to other people. Because if we can't do it to ourselves, it's hard for us to do it for other people. And I know we say like we forgive that person, but really, do we forgive them?
Right.
And so during that, like I remember walking down the stairs of my house, and and I'm sitting on the couch, and I drank the night before, and I was doing drugs the night before. And I just remember waking up and going like, God, this has got to be like, there's got to be some, because there were several times where I thought like, man, if this is it, I'm gonna take a bullet train. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
staying here. I'm not. It's not. If this
Right.
is my
I
rest of my
understand.
life, this is not life. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. I
Um,
understand.
and,
Unfortunately, I get it. Yeah.
and like I think most of us, especially as men, we have that hero's journey in us. We go like, man, there's got to be something greater. This has
Yeah.
got to be for a reason. Like if this is my dragon, then like please help me learn how to slay it.
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting on that couch that day and just going like, man, there's got to be something. This has got to be the last day. Like last night has to be the last night. And fortunately for me, and if you want more details, I can tell you how many times I relapsed or how many times I knew God, but still went back to the old choices. But this was the
Sure.
time. This was the day where I finally just went like, this is it. And that was 9 years ago, almost 9.5 years ago. And it gave such peace and clarity to the past and to where we could go in the future. And
Yeah.
I never had that without God. I never had the understanding of even the suffering or the point of it. I never had
Right.
an understanding of like where my bad choices came from and where my good choices could take me. And there was so much self-loathing and hate from, it
Yeah.
not and then that got projected to the world, right? Like if I'm this way, like everybody else is this way and the world's a horrible place. And it really did. And I'm not like, my parents were great parents. I'm not blaming my
Right.
parents. I mean, at times
I
I
get
blame my
it.
parents, right? But I was like the victim, and you guys
Hmm.
were the perpetrators, and the world was the perpetrating me. So if I'm the victim, but now when you got to God, you became empowered. You became like understanding that any change you wanted to make through God, it was possible.
Right.
And there was just this freedom that never came in life and has never come in life from anything worldly, only from the spiritual. And that's really the journey. And I hope I answered your question, but that was really the journey in coming to God.
No, and you did in multiple ways. Like there were so many layers to the answer. But what I love about it is you said the exact word that I was hoping to hear, which was forgiveness, right? And
Mm,
that for God, I think people get it too conflicted. They don't they make it too complicated, and because it's hard, like you said, it's hard to forgive ourselves.
yes.
And so, how could a God forgive me so simply of all the things that I cannot forgive myself for?
Absolutely.
Right. And I think the other part of that is, and because we know we're human and we know we're going to make a mistake again. So, why forgive me today? Because I'm going to screw up again tomorrow. Right.
For sure.
And that's the scary part of the asking for the forgiveness because you're like, dude, I don't believe in myself to not screw it up tomorrow. So, I'm
Yeah.
not going to ask for forgiveness today. But God's not saying that. He's saying, brother, let me help you be stronger tomorrow by forgiving you today, filling you with my spirit, and being your riding shotgun with you through this journey called life. Leverage me, lean on me, follow me, right? And when you do trip up, unfortunately, I'll be there to catch you, and away we go, right? And
Yeah.
I think that is one of the hardest things. And I will tell you, that was something I struggled with in my marriage when we were younger married. I couldn't believe my wife when she would say she forgave me because
Mm,
how can you forgive me when I can't forgive myself? Like I don't believe you,
absolutely.
right? And so that would be an antagonistic conversation that until I finally really got aligned with my faith, could I actually fully believe that she forgave me.
Mm,
Right. And that was a challenge in my life. And so I think a lot of people do find their way to God, like straight up as an adult. Like, because like you, I was raised in a faith-based home. We had faith. A lot of my cousins and aunts and uncles and everybody had religion. Um, but it wasn't like I was not super religious as an adult, right? Like
okay.
I left the church as a teenager, went on my merry way, and my wife and I, it was when my oldest son was born that she was like, I kind of want to go to church so that we can have some help teaching him some of
Yeah.
the stuff that we're not embodying as parents, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like not even lying to you. Like
I
that was
love
kind of the conversation, right?
that.
Like,
We're not living it, so let's go take around people that maybe are, or at least talking about it. You know?
brother,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
we could get somebody in a Sunday school class can teach him some things because she's like, I don't know how I feel about God. How am I going to teach him about God? But I
Yeah,
want
for
him to know
sure.
about God, right? I don't want to be a hypocrite though. And we found different churches that really fit us
Mm,
and gave us good words that gave us good vision. But ultimately, it was my deep roots, right? The roots that my parents had put into my spirit, and then my own making a choice as an adult to believe, right? To have faith because I believe I had to choose it. But then I had to ask for it as well. And then finally feeling that forgiveness. And then away the whole thing went, right? But it started with that forgiveness. And then, of course, right behind that's hope and all the other good things that come with it. So thank you so much for sharing your story. When you got into the coaching space, were you pulled into the space or did you kind of push your way into the space? Like, what was it about working with people to help them better their situation that got you into that arena?
yeah, yeah. And I almost tie it back to even the God thing that we just talked about, where so when you get closer to God, just keep in mind if you're not close to God right now, you probably don't have too many attacks. But as soon as you try to get closer to God, Satan's going to attack you more. And so
Mhm.
the truth is, I think it's almost like this. And if you go look up the word Lucifer, which is Satan, right? Lucifer means light bearer. So it means
Mhm.
he brings the light. And he in heaven, we believe he was a trial lawyer. That's one of the thoughts, right? Is that he was a trial lawyer before. So
Right, right.
he brings your like he brings your file of your sins and he brings them to light. So whatever challenges you sin wise, and he brings it to light, and then he puts you on trial. But
Mhm.
the truth of the matter is, God's so great because his grace, and he wants you to be obedient because he's going to give you the best life if you're obedient to what he's telling you.
Mhm.
So when you fail, all he's asking you to do is he knows you're not going to not fail, right? He knows you're going to fail again. So all he's asking you to do is make the loop quicker. Hey, once you fail, like don't turn away from me, turn back to me.
Right.
And the whole point is to speed that process up. Like, oh man, I screwed up, back to you. Oh, I screwed up, back to you. And then, oh, before I screw up, back to you. So I screw up less and less and less. Um,
Amazing.
do you want to say something on that? Because if not, I'll go to the coaching question.
No, keep going.
Okay,
That was
okay,
just
cool,
an amazing way to explain that loop thing. I never heard that before, but that's
cool.
just an amazing way to say it.
Thanks. It's the spirit. I'll give
Hey,
give
I'm
all
into
credit to
it.
God and the spirit. So, with the coaching thing, like I said, I went to those live events, and that's really where I started to coach people on a lower level
Mhm.
and be able to like coach them and help them through their problems. And then I realized, just like God, I wanted to help people come back. Like, hey, if I'm here and I want to go here, okay, I'm going to edge towards this way, but I'm not going to maybe get to the outcome that I want. So I may come back to my old identity. And how do we close that loop and make it quicker? And so
Mhm.
for me, really, I found my way into coaching from the events, and then, working with Michael was his name, Michael Burnoff he's in Scottsdale, Arizona. If anybody wants to look him up, great guy. But he really, when I was working with him, he just said like, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And I said, I want to help people. Like, I've seen too many people have better lives, including myself, from your event. I want to figure out some level, whatever that looks like for me.
Yeah.
And then I just moved up here, and luckily, luck or God, however you want to put it. I moved up here, and then I met somebody, and they were just like, "Hey, you got to meet this guy. Like, he's working with people. He wants them to like not just have therapy, but he wants them to coach." And so we just got connected to a few good people when we moved up to Utah, and that's really what kicked it off. And then we went and knocked on business doors and drove around a bunch of buildings, and everybody thought that was crazy, but we did that because we're working on getting business.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Very cool, man. Very cool. I think that just the people that are in the space of helping other humans, I think are very special people,
Thanks.
right? Because there's a lot. I mean, and I say that from the perspective of coaches, educators, law enforcement. Pick your flavor of person. That I broke my back one time and I laid on the ground, called 911, and knew they were coming to get me,
Mm,
right? The people that feel that step into that gap, that help people out when they're going through something in life, whether it's whether it's a ministry person, whether it's whatever that person is, I think are very special people because it takes a lot out of you, I'm sure, to help people go somewhere in their life, right? Personally, there's got to be a load, right? I know the load that I've had in my life helping people, whether I was in the military. I tell my students, I was like, 3 days this week, that door is opened up with somebody bursting into tears.
mm.
And I had no understanding as to why. And I was the person they sought out to come talk to because they needed to get it off their chest. And oh, by the way, there's no time for this because you got to go to class. Like the bell just rang, right? But thank you for stopping by to drop
Yeah,
your load on me. I will carry for the rest of the day. I
for
love you
sure.
for that.
Yeah.
I appreciate you. And so for people that step into that arena, it takes us, you've got to, in my opinion, especially to be good at it, you've got to be called to it or you've got to be pulled into it and you've got to have a higher purpose to do it. And so I was interested as to how you got there, but and I appreciate you for sharing that because as we get into this next part about your running and the leadership you're doing with that, I'm sure that's all part of the same journey. And I also appreciate your story, how you kind of put yourself through physical hell to then bring them along to
Absolutely.
get them hooked into, well, what is he talking about, right?
Yeah.
And because especially with men, right? Men are impressed by feats of strength or feats of like, you did what?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you did that?
Yeah.
Wow. Like, but you look like me, bro. Like, how did you I could do that? Yeah, bro. You too could believe in God, brother. Let's go.
Yeah.
Chop chop.
Yeah.
All right. And we're having a whole different conversation, right? In the way it goes. So the running thing, you are currently working, just so I understand this correctly, to run around the border of our entire country.
Yeah. So right now we've run for over 4 years straight. So we started 2022. And we can go over the details and explain more how that all worked out if you want to hear the full story.
Yeah,
But
I do
so
definitely.
okay, so January 2022 we start, right? And man, the day I woke up, it was January 8th. And I
Okay.
just remember waking up and going like, man, the pull-ups wasn't enough. The 50 mile wasn't enough. The running the marathon was enough. Because it wasn't.
Okay.
It because I wanted to do something bigger. Gary, when
Okay.
you said, man, when they look at me and they go like, Chris is not impressive. Because it's not like people outside looking in, you go like, it's extraordinary that he's run that long. It's not, it's ordinary things extra. And that's what I want people, like you said, that guy that goes like, oh, if Chris can do it, I can do it. That's what I want. Because I want you to realize like I am not exceptional. It's God's power that runs through me. And because I obey and I'm serving a bigger purpose and mission. But without that, like, you can do it too.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole purpose. And so, like, when we started in January 8th, I woke up and I'm like, man, you know, sitting on the edge of my bed, I'm like, we got to do something bigger. And I go like, all right, you know what? I'm going to start running a mile. Because I looked back at my tracker, and even every day of training during the 50, we'd never run more than 4 days in a row. So I was like, I don't even know if I can run 5 days in a row. So I was like, let me do a mile. I'm going to start so small, so stupid, and so easy that if I can't, like, if I don't do a mile in 24 hours, I'm going to laugh at myself, right? I'm literally, if I'm going to bed and I haven't finished a mile, I'm just going to go to bed and go like, okay, get back up and go run. Because it's so simple, right? 15-minute walk, 10-minute run. So we make it real simple. We make it real small. We get started and we start running the mile. And one thing I said to myself when I became a coach, and this is a couple important reasons for me to become a coach, was one, I wasn't going to tell anybody to do something that I hadn't done or that I'm not currently doing. Like, I never want to be the used to be, right? Used to be's don't make no honey. I used to be this, I used to be that. Used to be's don't make no honey. That's a Les Brown quote. And so I always love that. And I don't want to be a used to be, right? I want to tell you about my press clippings from 60 years ago and tell you to do something. So I wanted to be active and do it. And I wanted to do something so hard and so demanding that other people could go like, man, if he can do it, that he's simply not that extraordinary. I can do it too. And so we get into coaching and we get into the running, and really it's about us being our best self. Because then if we're going to be our best self and we're going to ask other people to be their best selves, we're going to show, right? It's the church thing. You took your kids to church to see an example. I just want to be the example. And so we started the January 9th, we got up, we started running the mile. We did a mile every day for 90 days. And really, like I said, it started with, let me see if I can do a week. Then we got to a week. Then we're like, let's see if we can do a month. And then let's see if we can do 90 days. And originally we were like, oh, we'll run across America. That'll be cool. Man, let's do that, right? Like, people have done, and there was somebody doing that right then, that right at the beginning of the year, there was somebody doing that from Britain. He came over here. He was going to run it across the quickest that it's ever been done. So I'm watching his videos. I'm like, cool, let's do the across America thing. My wife quickly Google searches it, 200 to 500 people. Well, we're not doing that. Not going to do that at all. That's way too many people. Because I love doing, like, my part of my drive and part of my identity, and this is the reason it's important to know what drives you and what your identity is doing something unique, doing something so dang hard that people go like, that's crazy. So I wanted to incorporate those two things. So then my wife, you know, and I were running, and then a year goes by and we're still trying to figure out, like, will we do like a V? So upper West Coast down to the bottom of Texas, back up to East Coast. And then eventually about 2.5 years into the running, my wife goes like, why don't you run the perimeter of America? That would be really cool. And I'm like, all right, now we're talking. This sounds unique. This sounds something fun. This could be very challenging. Let's look it up. Let's see how many miles it is, you know? So a little less than 12,000 miles we'll run. We'll run every day of the calendar year, 365 days. And when we were looking at it, we were trying to decide, so a 50K is 31.1 miles. So do we do a 50K or do we do a 50 miler every day? And we decided that we want people, especially men, but people, to look and go like, Chris has kids. He has a wife. He's not sitting over there, massive wealthy. He doesn't have a huge company that's going to fund him all this stuff while he's doing it. But he's not using those things as reasons to not do it. He's using those things as reasons to do it. And when we looked at the mileage, we went, because I was very set on like, let's do 50 miles. And my wife's like, that's going to take up a ton of the day. If you want to have any relationship with the kids and me, like, that probably isn't the smartest. Like, this is about having a lifestyle because we want to travel in an RV around the United States, even after this. Right. So we decided, all right, let's make it about lifestyle, family, God, and running. And really, when I started the run thing, I wanted to show people like, man, this is like, if we can run this much, like, look at what God made us capable of. And it's really shifted to, man, look at how ordinary and weak I am. And look at like what God can do when his power flows through you, when you're very connected to him. And the running has been the biggest spiritual growth. It's helped me become the best father I can be yet, and the best husband I can be yet. And I wouldn't get any of that without running. And that's just running every day. Right. So really that's how the running journey started. And that's really how, you know, the coaching journey tied into it.
I love it, man. I love I love everything. I love knowing yourself well enough to know what inspires you. Right. That's one of my favorite things. I tell people motivation is not my favorite because I feel like it wears out. Inspiration is, I think, what you need to know. What's your muse, right?
Yeah.
What is the thing that fires you up? And then how can you align that or use that to align you with your purpose, like you said earlier, or the things you want to get done in this world and allow it to help keep you going. And I appreciate your wife balancing you out because it's not just about accomplishing the goal as fast as possible, but it's about balance, right? It's about balancing out, but all good things in the proper amount, right? As you do things
Absolutely.
in life, trying to figure it all out. Even though balance sounds good, I've still never figured it out fully. It's tough when you're a person who's passionate about living a life, right?
For
It's hard to
sure.
balance things out, right? But like you said earlier, it's always a journey that you're taking on, and hopefully tomorrow you'll be better than you were today,
Yeah.
and away you go. I love the idea though of going around the country and showing your kids not just this great country that we get the opportunity to live in and the wild differences in the areas of the country because it's so different when you go to different parts of it, but then to also get to see you and your family, your wife doing something that's incredible.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And as you do it, I'm sure you guys are going to have, it's just going to be the experience of, without a doubt, a lifetime. God only knows what you're going to do after you run the dang perimeter of the United States.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's get through this one first,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, for sure. That's
Then
what my wife keeps telling me. Like, oh, hold on, before let's finish the first thing first. Okay, that's smart.
I get it.
Yeah,
And then I appreciate all the planning that you guys are putting into it, probably looking at maps and figuring out strategically. The
oh yeah,
RV thing answered one of my questions, right?
yeah.
What you were going to help for accommodations. Um, Yeah, amazing. Now, one of the areas that when I was researching on you a little bit, you talk a lot about obedience. Um, and then as I listened to you tell me about how the running has just changed your life, right? And I would imagine in your mind the running has been linked to obedience, right? Like you must run now because you're obediently doing what has been put in your path to do, right? Um, how important is is obedience to a person as they're trying to work their way through this journey of life, and why the word obedience?
Yeah, yeah. And I even want to go back to one of your podcasts I was listening to, and you talked about resiliency, which, by the way,
Mhm.
was very like aha moment for me. So I really appreciate it. And you said you like perseverance more.
I do. Yeah.
And I really like that. I really dig that, because
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of resiliency. I feel like I have a ton of it, but I really liked your perspective of shifting that to perseverance. So I want to say first, I appreciate that. So I'm hoping to do the same thing right now with obedience.
Mhm.
So, most of us look at it and go, especially in today's American world, it's like, oh, I don't obedient. That sounds like somebody has control over me. I don't want to do that. I
Mhm.
want to be free and have freedom and do what I want. I will put it this way. I think obedience gets the wrong rap because we don't have God's perspective on it. And I have 1%, so I'm going to give you the 1% perspective of God that I have from it. If somebody came up to you and was like, "Hey, I have the greatest plan for your life. It's going to have you have the best life here right now. It's going to have you have the best life after. It's going to have you have the most joy, power, and like clarity and peace and comfort in your life, no matter what storm you go through." You into that?
All
And if
day.
yeah, all day. But
All
most
day.
people think obedient, like, oh, he's just going to control me. Like, no, thou shalt and thou shalt not. Those are the commandments. But the piece that people miss about the obedience is the covenant. And that is the relationship piece. And Christ didn't die on a cross for religion, he died for a relationship. So to me, when I look at obedience, it is a relationship. Because guess what? When I marry my wife, I'm obedient to her. She's obedient to me.
Mhm.
We are dedicated. So I got 4 D's: drive, dedication, determination, and discipline. And everybody wants discipline. But what I'll tell you is, just like I told you before, is I know what drives me, right? And I'm clear on what I'm dedicated to. But when I'm dedicated to the obedience and I'm dedicated to God, we are building trust with each other. And that's what obedience shows. He he shows me and he tells me through scriptures what I can do and what he promises. And he says,
Mhm.
if you do this. So now we're building trust in a relationship together. Okay, I'm going to obey you. And then you're going to also obey what you said and do what you said. And so obedience is this amazing trust building relationship that you have. And if you can do it with Heavenly Father, you will have such a better like base for you to build it with anybody else. And so to me, obedience is this line in the sand that says, here is your greatest standards. Here is the greatest way you can live. Here is the person that loves you the most and knows you better than you know yourself. And all he's asking you is, here's a clear plan. Can you follow it? And most of us say no, because it's my will, not thy will.
Mm-hmm.
And we know like, oh, okay, I want these things. I want the outcome to look like this. And when we realize like that's all worldly stuff, that's not spiritual stuff. And if you go read Romans 8, life after the flesh, we're already dead. But life after the spirit, you'll live forever. And when we realize like all the warfare that's happening right now in this world is spiritual warfare. It is not carnal warfare. And so when we understand obedience, now we are spiritually primed to live our best life, to become the best person. Because one of my greatest fears is I go home to heaven. And God shows and he says, like, what were you doing the whole time down there? And he goes, like, here's a mirror of you. You could have been this, but you missed the mark and you were this. And that gives me so much like good energy of fear of like, man, I don't want to do that. I want to live up to what he's put in me. And that only comes from obedience, because we will never live our best self without being obedient to something. We will never know our true greatness inside and our pushing our limits and our boundaries without being obedient to something. Because I'm obedient to the run. Because the run isn't about me. The run is about the men that we're going to show and to show people through God, this is what you could achieve. And it's just like you brought up earlier when you brought up about the girls that jumped out of the marathon with my wife, right? They thought it was about them. I didn't do training enough. I didn't do this. Just listen to your statements. If your statements are a lot of like eyes, I can tell you what the problem is.
Right.
It's because you're so deeply focused on the things you don't have, and it's about you that like, of course you're going to jump out, because it's not about serving others. It's not, the girls didn't say like, oh, we're with Mel. She wants to run it. It's her last one. Let's serve her. They said like, no, I didn't do it. I'm going to jump out. And so to me, like that's the reason obedience is so important, because when we go like, hey, I have a mission, I can't fit Chris, guys come to me all the time, like, yeah, man, but like, I don't know how to figure out my mission. Like, I don't know what like thing to do. And I go like, how many times have you heard a prompting to do something and you haven't done it?
Yeah.
And they go like, oh, I do it all the time. I said, yeah. So like, if my son's in the other room and he moves over and I'm looking through the door and I can see him, he's in alignment with me. When he moves, he's out of alignment. So when we are obedient, we are now in alignment, and now we can feel the purpose easier. We can now understand our purpose easier. But most of us are trying to figure out something while standing still. And we got to get into a little active obedience, and then that image, that feeling, that clarity will come.
Facts. And I'll tell you, so many good things in this. First thing that came to mind as you were telling me your perspective, I thought about that Les Brown story about laying in the hospital bed and having the spirits of all the things around you that God sent your way and that you chose to let go by you. Then it haunts him, right? It haunts him a little bit. And so I resonate with that a whole bunch. And then I tell the story to my students often of the time I met my wife. Because if I had not taken the initiative on that day to hear that small spirit that said, hey, that person's special, you need to approach her, you need to be authentic, you need to be yourself, you need to not run any games, because there's something about that person that's going to change your life. And if I had not done that, my whole life would have been completely different, right? And then I always wonder, what if today I'm going to miss another one of those opportunities to capitalize on something that God's teed up for me, right?
Yeah.
That is it's now it's there for you. If you take it, you've got to go get it. It says your free agency to make that choice, but I'm really recommending you go do it, bro. Right? And so I definitely live with that sense of urgency in my life of feeling like make sure you're aligned and that you don't miss the opportunities to receive your blessings.
Yes.
Because to your other piece about obedience, I believe that if you prayed to God for a purpose, you prayed to God for whatever, and then you start running, and then you set a goal to continue running. So now you're probably praying to have the strength to keep running. Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well, guess what? God's blessing you with that strength to keep running. So now you got to be obedient to it because you're being blessed with the strength to keep running because you asked for it.
Yep.
Right? So be careful what you wish for because you just might get it.
For sure. Yeah.
So God said, you're right. But now that I'm giving it to you, you got to be obedient to it because you asked me for it. Because you're coming to the altar and you're asking for this strength, this purpose, this thing, but being loyal to yourself enough to finish what you start, in my mind, is directly aligned with obedience because almost anything I start, I pray on it and I ask for the help and understanding that it's the right thing, that I'm doing it for the good of God, that it's going to help bring people to him, that all the things are aligned and not just because I want to do it, right? Help me make sure that it's a good thing. Because sometimes if it's not a good thing, I'll regret it later because maybe I went out on that olive branch and it wasn't there. And then the final piece of the obedience piece, my son is currently going into college right now. He's a high school senior about to graduate, but he's starting off in junior college as well. And I'm to the space where I don't want to know about it, right? Bro, you're supposed to be in college. Come tell me when you're failing and I'll help you, but you need to have a little bit of this responsibility. Yeah. I don't want to be micromanaging your grades. My wife, on the other hand, she don't know how to not do that, right? She's going to be on him. And so he told her a thing that wasn't exactly true. And that was where I had a problem, right? I don't want to be in your weeds on what you're doing, but if you tell your mom something that's not exactly true, now you and I got a problem because what we're not going to do is we're not going to say one thing and then do another. I mean, I love your mom. You got to respect her. But what I don't want you to do is have a bad reputation because you're not doing the things you said you were going to do, and then vice versa, right? Because our reputation, our names matter. And I think we've got to be men of our word, right? And that's something that's very important. And then when I come back to obedience, I was thinking humility, right? A lot of people need to humble themselves to be, and until, like you said, yes, unfortunately, our culture coins the term obedience possibly as being a submissive posture.
Yes.
But no, man, at the end of the day, I'm a loyal husband, not out of submission, out of freaking, I choose to be loyal. Absolutely. Right? I am way more blessed than a lot of other people. I'm not submitting. I'm 100% obedient to the vows that we made, to the choices we made, all these things. But I think people, they get so worried about doing one thing, saying one thing, and don't recognize that they're not aligned with God. They're probably not praying on the things that they're doing, and they don't recognize that the obedience is going to directly, hopefully, correlate to the blessings that they're going to receive on the other side of that. And there's somewhere is also faith, right? You got to have faith that the energy you're putting into obedience has a purpose, right? And as you're not just doing it blindly, you're doing it because you believe in what you're asking for, and that the faith is in hope that this is all going to go the right direction. And how do you know it's working? Well, you get blessed. The blessings keep rolling in, right? And then you share the blessings with everybody else because, hey, everybody, look at all these blessings. You too could be blessed.
Absolutely.
Let's figure it out, right?
Yeah.
As you've gone on your journey, and then now you've got kids, right? You still, do you have one? Do you have more than one?
So I have a little girl. Girl. She's almost 4, and then we have a little boy that's almost 1.
Okay, so how do you think your journey through all of this has affected your parenting?
Oh man, it's. I think as men, we always look and we go like, man, we want to make sure this counts. We want to make sure like what we're doing is not just serving one thing in our life, but it's serving multiple things. And so when I look at running, because of the challenges, it is humbling. Overcoming shin splints for almost a full year, hernias, blown out shoulders, financial struggles, kids trying to, all of it. It refines you because
Right.
the breaking is for the remaking, right? And it's to realign. So to me, when I look at like being a dad with the running, man, I had gotten better, but I was still, had that anger thing that would just pop up and tonality that would pop up. And when you have a little girl, they're already sensitive to your tonality. And so they're even, my little girl's very soft and I love it, but for me, it's harder to remember that.
Right. Right.
Um, Man, but there is a piece that you have when you can go out no matter what's happening, you can go for a run and you can process. You can go for a
Right.
run and get like out in nature. You can go for a run and connect to God. And going out and doing those type of things gives you this internal peace. It also gives you an understanding when you go through those hard things, like a lot of things we think matter, they don't really matter. And the things that
Right.
are made of matter don't matter. But the things that aren't made of matter the most. And those are the spiritual and the relationships that you have. And so
Mhm.
to me, realizing like whatever struggle is happening at the time, I also just from again running, like I realized that if I give it about 48 hours, my day will at least change. Like my attitude, my problem will change at least by 1%. But a lot of
Mhm.
times it's like 180 or 160% that it changes. But I just have to give it that I have to have that pace and that grace. And when I have like the pace as far as patience and the grace, like it's just it's just easier to manage the kids. You realize like the little kids, they're feeling just like you. I'm getting out and running every day, like a run slower one day than another. Man, a run one day is half walk, half run, or one day I'm running in slides because I have a huge blister on the side of my foot. Same thing for those little kids. They're just trying to figure it out one step at a time. They're just trying to figure out like how they just got thrust into this world and they're trying to figure it out. And
Right.
so for me, it just has given me more grace. It's given me more understanding. It's given me patience and the ability to slow down. And I will say this, like when I go run, I'm not out there to run the record pace. Like I'll stop by a river and I'll pray and meditate. Like my little ones will come out and I'll go run down by the river and there's a playground. Like they'll come down and they'll play and I'll play with them.
Right.
And so the other piece it's given me as a father is just this unbelievable time and this unbelievable way to connect with my kids. That if I was at a 9 to 5, or if I was just working hard and grinding it out and I wasn't doing something like this, I would see my kids way less and our
Yeah.
connection would just be way less.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, one of my favorite parts is my little girl. I've been running. So she was born in April. I started in January of the same year. So I've been running her
Yeah.
whole life. So when she see like she'll sit there and see me and she'll go like, "Daddy, go running." Like she just knows. She just knows I'm going running and she
Yeah.
knows that's part of her life. And she'll come over and help me tie my shoes. And she just goes like she sees dad go run every day. And it's been a continued progression in her life and it's fun to see that because she sees something that is different than what most people are doing. And I want her to see that.
Thank you for that. And I asked because, parenting is such a complicated leadership role, right? I mean, there's husband, there's wife, there's son, there's husband. All these things about parent, dad is just it's complicated, right? And you don't really know what you're doing. I mean, at the end of it all, like you've got a 4-year-old. Brother, you don't know how many times I've asked people, like, what is it like to have an adult kid? Like,
Mm,
what does that feel
yeah,
like?
yeah,
Because my kids went going up. I mean, he's 18 now, and I'm still not sure what this is, how this is supposed to be, or what not going to be. And you're the dad forever, right? I'm
you
never
are.
not going to be your dad. And so, but it's such an interesting journey. I was just curious because a lot of parents are out there. I have a lot of parents that listen to this podcast from the kids that I teach at my school, and parenting teenagers or young children is hard,
It
and they
is.
have different complexities, right? When they're little and they can't move a whole lot, it seems like it's an easy time, but ultimately there was a lot of stress because it was new. Then they get older, now they can maneuver, and oh my God, now I got the terrible 2s or the
For
3s or
sure.
the
Yeah.
4s. The school's coming and the checklist, and are you keeping up with all the other kids developmentally and all this
Yeah.
stress and all these things, right? And so I was just definitely curious. And I like where you said that it was giving you grace. And I also like the piece where you said that, well, at least what I heard was you were letting time digest a little bit more before you made something be a crisis, right? And I
Yes.
learned that in the military. Um, we only move fast when somebody's life is on the line. If
Mm,
there's nobody at risk of dying, we're going to take the time that we need methodically. We're going to make the maneuver, right?
mm,
We're going to do the thing we're going to do at our time and place, right? That's what we're going to do, unless somebody's at risk of dying, and then we're going to go and we're going to follow our PPRs. We're going to follow the things that we already gamed out, and then oh, by the way, we might take some risk because it's the enemy always gets a vote, and it's not always safe, right? But at that time, it's acceptable, and away we go. And
okay.
living life, there's always going to be some risk out there. There's always going to be some challenges. But one of the blessings of parenting kids is hopefully you can keep them as safe as possible for as long as possible so they have the preparation to live their own life. So amazing stuff there.
I just want to
Uh,
say just two things real quick, if it's okay. I want to
mhm.
say, like, I think you said something again in the podcast that I was listening to that was really great, and everybody should go listen to that podcast if you haven't listened to it. Do you remember what the title of it was? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head.
Perseverance as a blueprint or something like that. But
Okay.
my intent for that podcast was perseverance over resilience because I feel like I don't mind getting up off the deck, but I would sure rather not always get knocked on my butt, right?
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
rather lean into life and persevere. Yeah.
So, one thing I really learned, and it's such a challenge for me. Like in my past, I would handle everything by like yelling and arguing, and I was just an aggressive young man and aggressive kid. I don't think that's different from too many men,
Mhm.
especially young men. But as I've gotten older, and really just since I've had my kids, man, I've had to learn how to calm my central nervous system, and
Mhm.
I've had to learn how to regulate myself so much better than I ever did. Because the truth of the matter, when we get mad with our kids, like it's only because whatever they're doing, we want to push against, and they want to
Yeah.
push against us, and so we get unregulated, and we then go to war.
Mhm.
Yet when I can look at my little girl and go like, okay, what's the problem? How do we now look at the problem together? So it's a me and instead of me versus her, it's a we thing, and we're working on the
Mhm.
problem. That's helpful. And then I will say though, I'm far from perfect, and I screw this up all the time, and I just have to keep remembering that I like one of my favorite things, and this wasn't for a long time. This has been the last 10 years, but I love saying sorry.
Mhm.
Like I love saying sorry to somebody because it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean I was wrong, but it means like I love our peace, I love our relationship, and I love like kindness together more than I love being right or trying to like tell somebody that they were wrong and I was right or vice versa. And so
Yep.
to me, like just having that built-in ability to go like, man, hey, baby girl, because I call my little girl, baby girl, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Dad screwed up here. He could have like you were having fun. I didn't even understand the situation that you were doing. I was trying to tell you what to do. I apologize. I got upset and I shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And I want her to see that side of it too. Because when she goes out in the real world, she's not gonna have two parents that are like, oh, hey, we're so nice and we treat like she's gonna go to the real world
Yes.
where people get
It's
pissed and they yell at you and they curse at you and they treat you like crap.
it's
And if you can't,
yes.
as you said in that video, like if you're not prepared to handle that, like I gotta let you fall. And that's one thing that's running's given me too, is I've fallen so many times and I finished every day, but I've still fallen, not like physically, but just mentally, spiritually, like just in every way I've fallen because the weakness shows up because it's so hard. And
Right.
so just like parenting, so hard. So I think if you're a parent out there, man, grace is one of my favorite words. I never knew it. I had high expectations, no grace, and that destroyed me. But if we're men of excellence, which we are, we have to have high expectations and high grace for ourselves and those around us.
Definitely. And I will tell you, it is watching my younger son plays flag football, and it's so hard for me to sit on the sidelines and watch someone else coach my kid,
Mm,
right? Because I have my opinions. My wife has her opinions, but I didn't want to be the coach. I don't got time. I don't got the bandwidth. I don't got the whatever it is, right? And I've coached them in the past. I didn't coach this season, but raising children that can be coached by another person is very important as so because they have got to learn, do they appreciate the coach's style? Do they like what
mm,
the coach is teaching? Not every coach is going to be for them, right? Not everyone's going to teach them the things they want to learn, but there are places you got to go in this world, that there are people you got to get through, those gatekeepers, if you will, that have opportunities that you want to get access to, that you've got to persevere through them.
Absolutely.
And then the other piece of that is, you know, throughout my career, I would they would be amazed at my ability to I've had young sailors draw pictures of me that was like me angry and me smiling, because they never knew which version they were gonna get, right? And they were like, how can you go from yelling at us to laughing with us? And I was like, because it's never personal for me, man. Like, you don't understand. Like, I'm not using your first name. We're not taking away birthdays. And oh, by the way, if you're not in a position of attention, you got a chance to get a word in edgewise, I need you to speak. Like, get in the conversation, but you've got to be as enthusiastic about the conversation as I am. If you let me steamroll you, I will win. And because again, it's when you're in a world, especially like the military, there's not always a lot of time. There's not always a lot of choice, right? We're either going left or we're going right. So if you got information I need to know, say the word, bro. Say it now. And if I need to ask you to speak, I don't need you on my team. I need people that want to raise their hand and get their perspective out there. And then I think as parents, because again, I've got 2 boys, it's hard watching my sons. I don't have any daughter. I've got a bunch of bonus daughters at work, right? That's what they all say. I got a whole bunch of bonus daughters, and they're little pistols, bro. I've been leading females since of 2010, and I will tell you what, they are pistols. They freaking get it done. It is amazing. That being, I mean, and so I'm very proud of them. But that being said, it's when I see the sailors I've raised, the cadets that I'm led, or even my own sons, when I see them get put under stress, God, it breaks my heart. But I'm staying out of the way, because I'm just like, come on, man, you can do it. Rally. Don't just cry. Don't just quit. Don't just choke. Because if they can make it, they will hopefully become an adult that will not falter. And for me, it's especially, like you said earlier, where the devil's the lawyer that's going to bring up all the things that's going to say you don't deserve forgiveness or whatever it is. I don't want these young ones to grow up one day and be at college or be in some place where they're being put to their first real challenge and them not have that strength to persevere through that. Right. And make the right choice. Or at a minimum, if they make the wrong choice, don't be afraid to come have that conversation with your mom, your dad, or God, and get right. Get right, get back on track, recognize none of us are perfect. You don't have to always tell the world. You can just tell God and figure it out, right? And then get back on track, right? You don't have to always go broadcast it on social media that you made a mistake.
We're having the worst day ever. Oh my goodness, somebody. Yeah. We've all seen those.
Just get with God, figure it out, and don't keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, bro. Absolutely. Don't be freaking crazy, and maybe we'll be okay. And those are the things that I think about, and it's scary. You know, it is scary. And you know, like I know, there are people out there that are mean. They're just mean, right? And they're not nice. They're even probably evil, right? In their sense. And you've got to be able to get through them, right? I'm not going to say the word defeat them, because I'm not always into all that. I'm going to work through you, bro. I'm going to work through you, win you over, or at a minimum, not let you harm me and my team, as I got to keep on moving in life. I'm not even going to take the time to cut your head off and worry about it, because that's just too much negative energy. Bro, I really appreciate the time. You know what I do at the end of my podcast? I do like some rapid question stuff, and I would like to do it with you, because I think you would throw some good answers out there. So, when you look back on your life, what do you think is the biggest, or let's not even say your life, let's just say right now in general, what do you see as one of the biggest leadership challenges for organizations today? Right, in the world of technology, what do you see as like the biggest leadership challenge?
I think it is 2 things. One, listening. So I think people are not good observers, and I mean listening to themselves first. They just tend to kind of just flow through their natural habits and flow through their natural stream of life, and there's no like putting a rock in it to see how the flow goes differently. So I think observing ourselves and observing others with an open perspective is one of the biggest challenges to leadership because we already have our prejudgments and we're not coming in as an open loop. We're coming in as a closed loop and trying to solve something. And if you like, one of my favorite sayings is, when you know, you don't grow, but when you don't know, you grow. And most of us want to present, especially as a leader, like, I know. But the truth is, most of us know far less than we know. So if we just act like we don't know and we sit back, we'll actually learn something and actually come up with a new perspective of our world, of our map.
Yep. Humble. That's money. Always approach it like it's a new day, right? New opportunity. Try to have a learning mentality and leverage your people, right? Because you may not know, but they probably do.
Well
Just
said.
verify that it's the right thing and not tribal knowledge.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Well, this is how we've always done it. Oh, yeah. Okay, all right. Here we go.
Yep.
Okay, so what's a piece of advice you would give to somebody struggling with organizational challenges, right? They don't feel like they're being valued in their family or in their workplace or in their social structure. What would you offer to that person as advice?
Yeah, you're a victim. So stop it. Because you are a victim. Like, you're already putting yourself in the victim mode. Somebody's a perpetrator on you. So I go with this because I learned this years ago, and it's one of the things I consider money, like in the bank. If I think about something, a discussion, something that happened between me and another person, if I think about it more than 2 times, I have a conversation. So you got to have courageous conversations, a lot more of them. Because the challenges with marriages, not enough courageous conversations. The reason money makes people divorce, not enough courageous conversations. The reason we cheat on each other, not enough courageous conversations. The reason we, talk trash about each other behind our backs, not enough courageous conversations. And that's all you got to do is start stabbing people in the front. Let's have a courageous conversation. I'm here to learn. I'm here to be an open book, right? I'm here to stab you from the front. Here's what I think, but really I want to know what you think. So you tell me what happened first, right? I'll first receive, then I'll return the serve. But I want to know, and it's courageous conversations.
Oh my God, I love everything about that. First of all, if you have not yet coined the term courageous conversation, do so immediately.
You got it.
Like, that needs to be like a Coke symbol, but courageous conversations on a t-shirt, right?
You got it.
That's amazing. And I used to tell people on the ship, I'm like a Ninja Turtle. People are trying to stab me in the back, but they can't get through my turtle shell. But every once in a while, I turn around and let them stab me in the front because I like to look them in their eyes.
I love that.
But to that point, right? I would much rather have a direct conversation, vice have a bunch of passive crap going around me, behind me. That's all just mucking up the energy in the world, right?
Yep.
And it is scary to have sensitive conversations, but it's part of life, and learning how to communicate matters. And I love the other piece that you talked about earlier about knowing how you're being perceived or what your weak areas probably are, and how you can continue to grow, right? I think those go just together big time. And also the whole victim thing, right? At the end of the day, you probably asked to be there, right?
Yep.
I don't want you on my team if you don't want to be a team player. But part of being a team player is having courageous conversations. Let's go, bro. Yeah. Let's go. Yippee-ki-yay, suit up. Yeah, Young Guns. Let's go. All right. Love it. How do you see the future evolving when it comes to people and technology? Do you think that plays a role in the future, or do you think that technology it's a leverage tool, but it's never going to really take away the black and white of what it takes to help people?
Yeah, I'll say it like this: is money good or bad? I'll say it depends on who holds it. So will AI, will technology? Of course it will. It'll always influence us. It'll always be a useful tool, but it can also use us as a tool. And I think that's the challenge right now with technology is most people are getting used by it. It's mastering them. And the question is, how do we learn how to master ourselves so things don't master us? And part of that is God. So to me, I think certainly will play. Yeah. And it will play the people that get played because they're wanting to be played. Right. It's like scripture says in there with the part where it's like, so in the scripture says this group is the mockers. Why are they the mockers? Because they mock. This group's the disbelievers. Why are they the disbelievers? Because they disbelieve, right? These people are the believers. Why? Because they believe. Like, people are going to be people. The technology doesn't change the people. It just gives them a new tool or a new outlet to be that person. So we're going to keep carrying those traits until we change as human beings.
I think everything you said is true. And I concur with you. I think technology is going to become the next scapegoat as to why you can't do something. And when I was on the ship, I was a firefighter for a lot of years, and I would teach the sailors, like, look, once the power's out, it's 1945, bro. It's not. There's no that fire doesn't care how cool your iPad is or whatever. We're in the middle of the ocean. The ship's on fire. There's no power, and we got to put the wet stuff on the red stuff, so we're not gonna go home. And it might as well be 1945, except for our personal protective equipment is a lot better in 2026. So happy, but guess what? They were still putting the fire out way back then, and they were making it home. So you can get it done. Just quit coming up with excuses as to why it's more complicated, because realistically, there's a lot of ways it's a lot more simple. On the reverse, I do think we carry around a lot of stress. A lot of us, especially the ones that are involved in social media spaces or whatever it is, because there's a lot of communications that are happening that aren't always real, but it feels like it, right? And your brain believes it to be real because your brain will lie to you. Your brain will lie to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Here comes some of the fun ones. On the weekends on the ship, we would always have a chance to eat either pizza and chicken wings. If I was to offer you one of those, which one would you pick? Pizza or the wings?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Jeez, this is not rapid fire. Hold on, I gotta think about this for a second.
Yeah.
I'm going pizza.
Pizza, got it. Yep. Okay, so on the ship, we have berthing, which is where we all live, right? It's where we all sleep. And people traditionally like the berthing because once you get the berthing clean, you can take a nap, right? No one's looking for you in the berthing. It's air conditioned. The lights are usually off. All the work is happening somewhere else. So you're never going to tell anybody you're done cleaning the berthing right away. On the reverse, a working party is where you send people like tributes, like on freaking that movie about Katniss and all the tributes. Yeah. You got to send tributes to the working party, and they're going to hump all the food on board. They're going to be in the freezer, putting all the food away. But what's fun about the working party is it's simple labor, right? There's not a lot of stress. Yeah. There's not a lot of extra thinking. You're just doing the work for that period of time. And you typically it's pretty fun, right? There's a lot of coking and joke, because usually the guys that are paid tribute are usually rambunctious, right? They're not always the best people. If I gave you a choice, would you rather go to the berthing or would you rather go to the working party? Which one would you pick?
Working party, hands down, no doubt. Okay. It'd be more fun. It'd be more work, and it would just make the day go. Everything would be better. Screw the nap, man.
I'm telling you, as people answer this question, I get a chance to see into their soul, right? Because for me as a leader, I know it. Okay, I know I could be either or depending upon the day. Right?
Fair enough.
I get it.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna watch a movie. Would you rather watch a De Niro movie or a Pacino movie?
Ooh, man, that really depends on which one. Dang, that's a good one. I'm gonna go Al Pacino.
Okay.
I would think I would go De Niro, but I'm gonna go Al Pacino.
I love it. Looking back on your life so far, do you have a favorite place that you've ever traveled to?
Oh man, yeah, Bermuda. Hands down, like incredible. I mean, obviously they have a ton of tourists coming through there, but incredible people, incredible, very, very small island, very isolated. Just the water was beautiful, the people were beautiful, the land was beautiful, the food was great, just everything about it was exceptional. There's one road that goes around the whole island. You feel very connected and grounded there. I think that's definitely the best place I've ever traveled to.
I love it. I get it. I lived on Guam for 3 years, and it was an amazing island. And so I get that, right? And that vibe is it's calm.
Yeah, right? It's island vibe, bro. It literally is island vibe.
It is an amazing place. Yes, Puerto Rico is also pretty good. Okay. I've never been to Bermuda, but I got to get that on my list.
Do it.
I'm gonna do it for sure. Looking back so far and everything you've done, do you have one special particular achievement that you're just like, that's the one right now that I'm just so proud I did this?
The marathon with no training. Okay. Just because I wouldn't be spiritually where I am. I wouldn't be doing, I don't think, any of the things I would have done. And that came from, simply somebody dropping out. So that was a huge blessing for me. But definitely the marathon with no training is the catalyst for so much of this.
I love it.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite movie or television series?
I do. I'll give you my favorite movie. And probably people are going to go, what the heck is that movie? It's so old. It's A Wonderful Life. Absolutely.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Amazing.
My favorite.
I love that movie. That's an amazing. I watch it alone though. Nobody else in my family will watch it with me.
Oh,
But I watch it every holiday season. You know, it's
me
like my
too.
reset. It's like my
Yeah,
reset. Because as a kid, right, it was always on regular TV. There was no
absolutely.
cable.
Nope.
But it was a family event. Everyone's watching It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah,
Would you rather be independent or on a team?
on a team. I've done the
Okay.
independent thing. It's not as exciting as it sounds. Definitely a team.
Okay. Do you have a personal leadership philosophy? Is it your D's?
Yeah, yeah. I think the 4 Ds are a great one. I mean, I always say this. I think it's this: think, speak, act. TSA, think, speak, act. Like not the TSA you get frisked up by and you get the free fill up, on the, every Saturday when you travel.
Right.
But TSA, yeah, think, speak, act. Think. So think in, sorry, think in belief, speak in trust, act in faith. So if you think with belief, if you speak with trust, and then you act in faith, life will change forever.
Amazing.
Hands down.
Love it. So in the United States Navy, our senior enlisted leadership community is known as the Chiefs Mess, right? We're the Chief Petty Officers community. It's a fraternity. You get initiated into it. It's a big deal for us, right? I mean, it's a game changer in your life. And we've got some leadership principles. The principles are, number one is deck plate leadership, which is essentially leadership by example. Number two is institutional and technical expertise, which means understand the organization you are a part of and understand how to do the job you're supposed to do and manage both, right? You don't get to just be a mechanic and be a car salesman. Do both parts of the car thing, right?
Yeah.
Professionalism, which is not just have shiny shoes, but it's also carry yourself appropriately and manage yourself appropriately and be professional. It's a profession of arms, right? We're militants. We're going to be professionals, but some people think it's just about having, creases in your uniform. No, you look good when you're supposed to, but also be a professional.
Okay.
There's character, which that one, loyalty. There's active communication or be an active communicator, both up and down the chain of command. And then there's a sense of heritage, which is never forget where we come from,
Okay.
right? If I was to ask you which one of those resonates with you the most, which one do you think you would pick?
Never forget where you came from. It was the last one, man. Like,
Yeah.
If I just think if I forget where I came from, I went through all that for no reason, and I lost all the lessons. And good or bad, there's always lessons to be learned. And so I think you always remember where you came from because you always have a clearer picture of where you're headed.
Definitely. And the life that we live is cyclical for some reason. And if you talk to like your mom, your grandparents, somebody else, they may have an understanding as something you're going through because they may have had a similar experience.
Great point.
Right. And that's another thing for us is never forgetting, to share our stories with our young ones so they can connect that, hey, they used to be teenagers too, or they used to be, here's how we fought fires back in the 90s or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
That for us is very important just because we want to build trust with our people. And part of that trust is, again, how we do it as believers. We share our journeys so people can relate. All right. Would you rather lead or would you rather follow?
Ooh. I personally would rather follow. I realize it, and I don't know why I do it. I think it's probably from my dad, to be honest. But whenever we're walking in a group, I'm always behind. And it's like I've always, like my dad always said, he traveled behind to make sure everybody was safe and taken care of. And so like I just no matter if you're older or younger, I don't care. I sit behind everybody. I travel behind. It's like the wolf, right? Like I'm not saying I'm an alpha by any means. That's not my point. But like the alpha sits in the back because he needs to keep his view of the field. And if he's in the front, he can't see behind. That's the worst place to be if you're going to protect. So I say behind so I can make sure everybody gets where we're going safe.
I'm with you, man. I love that. And I agree because sometimes you're the person in the front, you're the first one to get taken out, right? You didn't see it
Of course.
right? And one thing we go through Chiefs initiation, I would always tell our Chief selectees, like, yes, we want to lead from the front, but never forget the rudder's on the back of the ship, right? We steer from the rear. So if you might see the iceberg coming, but you better make sure they get the word back there in the rear to start changing the rudder angle.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're all about to be swimming in the drink, right? And it's going to suck. And I think depending upon your team, depending upon your abilities, you've got to be able to, the best can go both fore, aft, port, starboard,
Sure.
do all the things, right? But I concur, like, especially, the old wolf, or what was that thing? The old bull and the young bull, right? And the old bull's always just walk on down and take our time. And when we get down there, we'll do whatever we got to do, right? You have to learn how to let it marinate a little bit, brother. Don't rush.
Yep.
And see the danger coming. Okay, Chris, man, how can people best support you as you're on your journey? Like, do you have a way that people, if they hear this story and it resonates, that they can either reach out to you, look you up, donate to support you on your journey? What can I best do to help you with that? Hey, can you hear me? Your audio cut out on me a little bit. I'm trying to.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yeah,
it's so much better when I don't mute you. I don't know how I muted you, but somehow my button got pushed. I apologize.
It's all good, man. It's all good. That's how this happens. So yeah, I'd asked you, how can people best support you in any way?
Yeah. So we've been doing podcasts, and somebody brought up, like, man, maybe people want to give money. And so we have set up a GoFundMe account that we'll have go live here in the next few days. If you want to support, like, hey, here's some new running shoes, or here's towards some sunglasses, and we'll show you where we're using the money so you can be part of it, right? It's not a you thing, it's not a me thing, it's a we thing. Mm-hmm. You can go to Chris Runs America. We have a newsletter there. You can get in contact with us through email there if you want as well. Or if you want to follow us on social media, that's an option as well. Chris Runs America or Chris Avery Coaching.
Okay. Love it. I will make sure that I get all that put into my packaging as well. Cool. Get that word out. I hope that you get, I have no doubt you're going to get everything you need to make this thing happen, man.
Thanks, brother.
I have no doubt your God's not going to let you down.
I appreciate it.
And be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you going to live stream while you're running?
Yeah, so we'll do some live streaming through the social media, like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, stuff like that. And then, so that'll be like day in, day out. And then we'll have a weekly wrap up, Q&A, also put together from the whole week of the struggles and the successes. And we'll edit it down for about like an hour episode, like a weekly episode for people on YouTube as well.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah. Well, Chris, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and to just drop all these pearls of wisdom on us, bro. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, heck yeah.
If there's ever anything that I can do more for you to help you out, let me know. And don't go far. I'm going to wrap this up here, though, so we can get this to be done, okay?
Sounds good.
I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody, if you like the words coming out of our mouth and you like the energy, please like, follow, subscribe us. Words from the Wise. Thank you.
And I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. Don't care for the critics, my words are like physics, a force that they can't stop. They just don't get it, I think they forget I'm not done till I'm on top. I know I was born for this. I know I was born for this. I believe we can write a story.
All right.